With Chapter 15, we're talking about violent economic crimes and crimes of intimidation. So with this particular chapter, we are going to talk about crimes of intimidation. We're talking about cyber crimes. We're talking about stalking. We're also talking about robbery, which is a little bit different from burglary, which we talked about in Chapter 14. With robbery, we're talking about the taking or attempt to take anything of value from the care, custody, or control of a person by force or by violence or by fear. And it's that by force, violence, or fear that distinguishes robbery from burglary. There are 367,000 robberies, generally speaking, every year. That particular statistic is from 2010, but it stays pretty steady over time. Bank robbery would be a category where location is some type of financial institute. 2.2% of all robberies take place in a bank or financial institution. 80% of those are done by a lone individual. Violence is rare in bank robberies, and 67 to 75% are eventually caught, which is what you see there with high clearance rate. The vast majority, 80%, are perpetrated by amateurs, which is probably why we see a high clearance rate with bank robberies. Commercial robbery is any type of commercial property, like convenience stores or fast food restaurants. Convenience stores are actually the top target. Gas stations are number 2. This accounts for about 15 to 18% of all robberies. Fast food chains are becoming another favorite target of commercial robbers. Street robbery, 42% of robberies take place on the street. It's more common in urban areas, larger cities. It tends to be a crime of opportunity rather than one with a lot of planning that takes place. The motive is usually financial. Carjacking, which we talked about last time, is the taking of a vehicle by force, and carjacking statistics often fall under robbery because there is force that takes place with carjackings. Sorry, let me go back here for 1 second. Professional robbers. Professional robbers are people that this is a way of life and that they continue to rob as a means or a lifestyle. They often need to have control and handle victims. There's usually a lot of stress, a need for cash, typically to support some type of impulsive lifestyle or a drug-related lifestyle. Robbers by groups. This particular typology that you see here was created by Porter and Allison in 2006, based off 116 cases of group robbery. They created this typology based on interpersonal behavior of the offender and how those robbers treated their victims. Kind of themes is what they created here. The first theme, top left, you see here is dominance, the method preferred by most professional robbers, where they want to completely dominate the situation and the victim. The second is submission. The robbers typically are not forceful enough, and victim struggles and gets away, or the robbers flee. This is typically an unsuccessful robbery. Number 3, cooperation. Offender manipulates victim to get them to cooperate, handing over property, opening safe, something like that. There's sometimes a threat of force, but not a lot of violence typically involved. And then we have hostility. The offender is hostile and aggressive, even violent from the onset, often initiates an aggressive response from victim, and violence can and often does occur. With commercial robberies, the cooperation theme is the most dominant one, and with personal robberies, the hostile theme is the most dominant one, according to Porter and Allison. Cybercrime is something that we all probably worry about these days. It's an illegal act that involves a computer system. This is a recent phenomenon, really in the past 20 years, since computers have become an everyday item for all of us. So it includes computer crimes, the unauthorized access of data, theft, stealing software, Traditional crime, where stealing the actual computer. Point of sale, where people steal credit card numbers or debit card numbers. Phishing scams, these are spoofing email scams where you click on something and it either sends a Trojan or some type of virus into your computer or asks you to put in information. And then illegal gambling would also be considered a cybercrime. Stalking. Stalking can be a violent crime. Despite media and political attention, information on stalking is limited. The definitions will vary from state to state. All states do now have anti-stalking laws. In terms of a general definition of stalking, it is a course of conduct directed at a specific person that involves repeated physical or unwanted non-consensual proximity, communication, verbal, written, or even implied or actual threats. California was the first state to implement anti-stalking laws in 1999 in response to the Rebecca Schaeffer case. Rebecca Schaeffer was stalked and ultimately murdered by a violent fan. The Tennessee laws for stalking, the Tennessee Code says it's a code of conduct. It means a pattern of conduct composed of a series of two or more separate non-consensuous acts. That causes emotional distress. It can include harassment, stalking. They define stalking as willful course of conduct involving repeated or continued harassment of another individual that would cause a reasonable person to feel terrorized, frightened, intimidated, threatened, harassed, or molested, that actually causes the victim to feel terrorized, frightened, intimidated, threatened, harassed, or molested. It is unconsented contact, following or appearing within the sight of a person, approaching or confronting the person in a public place, appearing at the person's workplace, entering onto a property without consent, contacting the person by telephone, sending an email or other electronic communication, and placing an object or delivering an object to the property. The victim means an individual who is the target or willful course of conduct. So that's what the Tennessee law says. One study found that 8% of women and 2% of men have been victims of stalking at some point in their life. 1.4 million victims each year. Rarely causes physical harm, so that's the good news, but it can have a lot of psychological trauma as opposed to physical trauma. The psychological trauma can include anxiety, depression. Some people feel like they have to move, change their phone number, change their name. Some go to extremes like changing their hair color, changing their place of work. So it can really be a scary, frightening, traumatic event for some people. And when it comes to stalking categories, this particular one is a 4-category classification by Beatty that was created in 2001. The simple obsession, top left, 60% of cases will fall under this category. This is an extension of a previous or failed relationship, usually involves domestic violence or psychological abuse. Control and power is the motivation. Can be the most dangerous category when the stalker has an "if I can't have you, nobody will" kind of mentality. So this is usually some type of previous relationship. Love obsession, casual acquaintance or complete strangers. Stalkers tend to have low self-esteem and obsess over their victim. They seek a relationship with the victim being the object of their obsession. Radhamania, the stalker usually has severe mental disorder, often delusional, usually stalks public figures. Statistically, this is actually very rare and usually not violent. And then the last one is vengeance. They're not seeking a relationship. The desire or the motivation is to cause a certain response from the victim, usually in response to some perceived injustice or revenge. So this is really one of those where you're stalking to actually scare or frighten someone. So with that simple obsession, this is the vast majority of stalkings. Again, usually an extension of domestic violence. It's really about power and control. Involves a failed or previous relationship. The love obsession is that casual acquaintance or even strangers. It's really about having an obsession over somebody that you want to seek a relationship. The offenders tend to have low self-esteem, and there's usually no violence involved with that. Radhamania, again, this is typically people that have some type of mental health issues and they target public figures. Rarely violent. Sometimes they do break into homes, send weird cards and letters, or today stalk public figures on social media like Twitter. And then we have that vengeance stalking. There's typically no personal relationship. The goal is to get a response from the person. It's usually some type of fear response with that particular type of stalking. There's another typology that was created in 2006. It's based on the offender-victim relationship. Similar to what we just talked about. The first one is intimate, and this is the most common, just like the last typology. This means in either current or former intimate relationship. Acquaintance is just somebody that you know casually. Public figure, this is the rarest type again, usually mental health issues. And then private stranger, this is literally an obsession over somebody that you don't know that you stalk. Cyberstalking is kind of a newer category with the recent popularity of social media, with texting, with location services on phone. We've kind of talked about a few of those things previously. So it's really kind of the use of some type of online communication to stalk a person. It can include chat rooms, email. Today, it's mostly through social networking sites like Facebook, Twitter, and even Instagram. And then certainly it could also be through text messaging. It's an easy way to access private information, particularly since a lot of us are not really aware or cognizant or pay attention to the amount of private information that we put out there on social media. And if we had somebody stalking us, they could easily find us if we're posting pictures or checking in at restaurants or things like that. So certainly everyone should take steps to make sure that they have their privacy settings set so that only their friends can see their private information, and really think twice about all of those checking in features and letting people know where you are at any given time. Now, this chapter also talks about hostage-taking offenses. Hostage takers hold someone against their will. That's really what hostage-taking is. There are two types: the instrumental, where there's some type of financial gain, so holding somebody hostage for money, so kidnapping or with a ransom, and then expressive, which is usually psychological, trying to take control over. Usually seems senseless, or sometimes it even includes suicidal behavior. So an example would be to show power, like a husband taking the wife and kids hostage and threatening to kill the wife or the children or themselves. In 1970s, the FBI created 4 categories for hostage-taking offenses. So these are the 4 categories that the FBI would use to categorize hostage takers. The first are terrorists. The second are prisoners. So these would be taking people hostage in a prison setting. Third would be criminals, who take people hostage while engaging in some type of other crime, like robbery. And mentally disordered. This is actually the largest category, with about 50% of all cases involving somebody with some type of mental health issue taking somebody hostage, and it's usually somebody that they know. Categories of hostage taking. This particular one was created by Call in 2003. So it's a more recent classification system than the FBI, and it expands it out a little bit. You can see while the FBI has got only 4, this particular one has 6 main categories with a bunch of subtypes. The main categories are the emotionally disturbed, and again, as just like with the FBI, a large number fall into this category. Political extremists that are taking people hostage in order to call attention to some type of political message. Religious fanatics, criminals, again, taking hostage while committing another crime. Prison inmates taking hostages in a prison setting, in a combination where it just involves many of the above. So it could be a political extremist committing a robbery and taking somebody prisoner while doing that. Call recognizes that the behavior and motivation is complicated and each hostage situation will vary, and that the vast majority of hostage-taking situations will probably not fit perfectly in any one of these particular categories. Stockholm Syndrome is a really interesting phenomena that we find with hostage-taking, where there is some type of attraction or attachment, really, between the victim and the captor. It's very rare. It was actually named after a case in 1973 where a female hostage ended up marrying her abductor. 3 factors are involved with this. They are together for a long period of time. There's direct social contact during incidents, and the hostage must be treated kindly. So this means that some type of personal relationship or identification develops, and it's usually when somebody's being held hostage for a very long period of time. Patty Hearst might be an example of somebody that might have had Stockholm Syndrome. You might not be familiar with that, but she was kidnapped back in the 1970s, I believe, and held for months and months and months, and eventually actually robbed banks with her captors. And she was charged when she was caught because there were clear security tapes of her holding guns and robbing. But she was found not guilty, and it's believed that she probably suffered from Stockholm Syndrome with her captors. Arson. Arson is any willful or malicious burning or attempt to burn with or without the intent to defraud a dwelling, house, public building, motor vehicle, aircraft, personal property, or another person. So it is a law enforcement has to determine that the fire was deliberately or maliciously set in order for it to be classified as arson. The Uniform Crime Report only classifies those which have been willfully or maliciously set. In 2009, there were 210,000 set intentionally. 13% of all fires reported to the fire department are classified as arson. In 2010, 41% of those were set by juveniles, 24% under the age of 15. So this is a young person's category of crime. And as a lot of the other categories that we looked at, it also tends to be male. 75 to 85% of arsons are set by males. Most arsons actually go undetected or unreported or unsolved. Most children who set fires are emotionally disturbed and need some type of treatment. Now, it is normal for kids to be kind of interested in fire. Gaynor has a 3-phase development that he talked about in 1996, and it really just shows how it is completely normal for kids to be interested. It's very common for kids to be interested in fire. They find it kind of universal in kids between the age of 5 and 7, so it's not uncommon that you would see kids playing with lighters or matches, or at least interested in fire. And then we get fire play between the ages of 5 and 9, where kids experiment with fire, actually lighting things, papers, things like that on fire. Now, normally it would end there, and kids learn that it is not appropriate behavior. So by 10, most kids have learned the dangers of fire and they stop. A small percentage of them will move on to the next category, where they continue to set fires past the age of 10. So fire setting behavior would be kids over the age of 10 who have kind of pushed past just that kind of interest or normal interest. They continue to set fires despite awareness and the danger and certainly the consequences. They tend to have impulsive behavioral issues, poor social skills, aggression, peer rejection, conduct disorder, all of those big red flags that we've talked about in previous chapters. They often engage in a variety of other crimes and delinquent behaviors, and do tend to have a high rate of family maltreatment. So this is typically kids that are not coming from good homes, that there is some type of maltreatment in their past. Now, when it comes to fire setting among adults, this is persistent, repetitive arsonists who tend to have a motivation to take control or even gain some sense of recognition. So it really is about people that feel out of control in their lives, or that they want to be famous or get some kind of recognition or be the center of attention, something like that. Arson is usually precipitated by some type of life event, so being fired from a job or divorced. Research suggests that repeat arsonists have a wide variety of mental health issues. They tend to come from troubled backgrounds. Mental health issues are not uncommon. Some abused with fire and burned as children and become kind of fascinated with fire. There are 6 motives of arson that have been discussed. The first is revenge, spite, or jealousy. And by the way, the motivations can vary. While some are for psychological reasons, like we just talked about with adult and juvenile offenders, and some are not going to fit perfectly in any one of these. But in general, the 6 motivations of adult arson is revenge, spite, or jealousy, vandalism, or malicious mischief, and that's usually where we're going to find juveniles under that category. Crime concealment or diversionary tactics to try to get law enforcement off the scent of another crime. Profit or insurance fraud, intimidation, extortion, terrorism, sabotage, and pyromania and other psychological motives. So people that have mental health issues there. Now, with the juveniles that set fires, the motives usually tend to be just vandalism, thrill, excitement. Sometimes it is to get back at authority figures, so targeting schools or churches. But the vast majority of the time with juveniles, it's not uncommon for it to be vandalism, thrill, or excitement. Female arsonist. Very little data. They are statistically rare, like a lot of the crime categories that we've looked at. They do tend to be older, in their 30s. They too tend to have a history of drug and alcohol use and abuse, and usually involve some type of revenge. So when women set fires, it's usually some type of revenge against some perceived injustice against them. Now, Cantor and Fritzen in 1988 created a typology based on behavior patterns and crime scene actions of the offenders for arson. At the top left, we see the expressive person pattern. This is the most common. There's usually a mental health issue, and it's usually a cry for help or attention. The expressive object, these are serial fire setters who are fascinated with fire. The goal is not to injure or harm or destroy property. They typically burn trash or abandoned buildings, and it's really just about being kind of fascinated or obsessed with fire or fire starting. Instrumental person, they target the arson activities against a person or organization, someone in authority, a school teacher, a family member, some type of organization. And then instrumental object, this is most often associated with young offenders, usually linked with some other type of crime, burglary, financial gain, and arson takes place at the same time as the other crime. Again, as with the exception of robbery and stalking in this particular chapter, was a kind of a mishmash of a lot of different things, but we're kind of getting to other categories of crime that don't fit neatly in some of the other ones that we have talked about previously in class. And these are a little bit more clear-cut because there's not a lot of psychology, because most of these, the motivation tends to be pretty straightforward with some type of financial gain at the center, or with some of them a revenge type of motivation.